and welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Monday, December 10th. Xi Jinping shadows Deng Xiaoping's Guangdong tour. Hospital turned execution ground, what this Weibo post reveals. And it's Human Rights Day today, but you wouldn't know it in China. In our top story today, history repeats itself. New Communist Party chief Xi Jinping is currently touring southern China. It's strikingly similar to a trip made 20 years ago by former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. The Chinese regime depends on economic growth to stay in power, but will Xi's tour be enough to pull off another period of economic boom?
First stop, Shenzhen. Incoming Communist Party chief Xi Jinping is in Guangdong province, and the trip to southern China is making a statement that some say is 2 decades old.
Xi's visit to Guangdong is to publicize his reform image. Like what Deng Xiaoping's southern tour did in 1992, it kickstarted China's lame duck reform, that is, an economic reform without political change.
Xi Jinping's tour of Guangdong province is his first trip as the leader of the Communist Party. The similarities to former leader Deng Xiaoping's southern tour 20 years ago are hard to miss. From the understated coach Xi traveled in to this tree planting ceremony. Like Deng's trip, Xi Jinping's comes at a time when the Communist Party is faced with prickly political and social challenges. Deng's answer was full-blast economic reform and opening up, but with one condition: the Communist Party was to stay the supreme ruler. But former professor at George Mason University, Zhang Tianliang, says that road was what led to the current situation, a political system that's grossly inadequate to deal with the changes that economic reform has brought.
This road can't go on. Everyone can see clearly now that if Xi continues Deng Xiaoping's path, it'll be another dead end.
On Monday, state-run CCTV reports that Xi Jinping told Guangdong's entrepreneurs and government officials that there are new economic challenges ahead. Xi also said reform must be deepened for China's market economy. Democracy advocate Wang Beiling, now living in exile in the U.S., says the communist regime is dancing to its own tune.
The Communist Party is stuck in its own delusion. It wants to be politically conservative, but push the economy to maintain power. That's just what it hopes for, and it's dancing with shackles on.
The coastal Guangdong province has been at the forefront of economic development under the Chinese regime. Xi Jinping's father, Xi Zhongshu, was the provincial governor between the late 1970s to early 1980s. During his term, he influenced Deng Xiaoping to allow the region greater economic liberalization.
And there's been a major revelation by a Beijing-based lawyer that could confirm allegations of forced organ harvesting in China. What did the lawyer post online last week that's since been removed from his Weibo account? Let's find out.
On December 6th, a Beijing lawyer revealed something stunning on the Chinese internet. Han Bing, who goes by the Weibo handle Hangzhou Lawyer, says a Chinese hospital turned into the execution ground for a prisoner on death row. The prisoner was reportedly rushed to a hospital that morning, where he was forced to sign an organ donation form. His family was not contacted about the execution. He was killed in the hospital where the quality of his organs would be ensured. Han wrote in his Twitter-like Weibo account, quote, "These conscienceless judges and doctors turned the hospital into an execution ground and a market for organ trade." Han later spoke with NTD.
It is written in the criminal justice policy of the Supreme Court that executed prisoners must meet their family before the execution. However, the court didn't do that in this case. We will have some actions in the next step, and then if we make progress, we'll make it public.
Han's post received a lot of attention. Within one day, it was shared over 18,000 times. Over 6,500 people commented on it. But by December 7th, the post was removed from his account. In recent months, the Chinese regime has faced increasing international pressure over transplant abuse in the country. Chinese authorities say they rely largely on executed prisoners as a source of organs for the 10,000 transplants that happen each year. Han's revelation would confirm widespread suspicion that the prisoners, unlike what authorities say, are not willing donors. The regime also faces allegations that it's not ordinary prisoners being used. Rather, prisoners of conscience, mainly members of the Falun Gong spiritual practice, are being actively killed for their organs. Others targeted include persecuted minorities such as Uyghur Muslims and House Christians.
Today is Human Rights Day, and events have been underway since last week to mark the occasion. The European Parliament held a special rights forum in Brussels last Friday, and while discussions covered a broad range of issues, China was of particular focus.
On December 6th, the European Union hosted a two-day forum in Brussels on how to better promote human rights around the world. China was one of the countries discussed in the forum.
Overall, our assessment is that law is not above politics in China. So politics still remains supreme.
One session started with a movie by blind Chinese human rights lawyer Chen Guangdong. Chen defended women who were victims of forced abortion under the one-child policy. Other groups, such as the Tibetans, Christians, Uyghur, and Falun Gong, are also subject to state persecution.
Our most pressing concern inevitably lies with the deterioration of the situation in the Tibetan areas of China. The situation of Falun Gong practitioners, especially when detained, remains worrying.
Falun Gong is also called Falun Dafa. The Falun Dafa Information Center says that Falun Gong practitioners are the largest group of prisoners of conscience in China today.
The case of the Falun Gong illustrates this type of torture and ill treatment. It's systematic, it's institutionalized, and it occurs on a very wide basis.
One of the democracy leaders in the Tiananmen Square protest said China's political structure is to blame for its human rights abuses.
If Xi Jinping wants to change China, he must stand above or out of the Communist Party's interests. If he is still involved in the Communist Party, I think it will be impossible for him to succeed.
He calls on the help of the international community to stand up for the rights of the Chinese people and to break the silence. This member of the European Parliament says the international community needs to get beyond rhetoric and take concrete actions to stop state-backed persecution in China.
And while Human Rights Day is marked across the world, the same can't be said in China. Dissidents report being kept under house arrest, and those who did make it out on the streets are quickly rounded up.
December 10th, Human Rights Day, is to mark the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. The irony is not lost then in China, when rights activists were blocked from appealing at the United Nations office in Beijing.
The transit stations in front of the United Nations Human Rights Office are closed. Military police have put up barricades. There's a red building opposite the office, and inside the car park, there are more than 100 police cars there.
For other dissidents in Beijing, the day was to be spent indoors.
I'm at home. The police have blocked my house. They came before I even got out of bed.
Beijing authorities also kept prominent dissident Hu Jia at home. He told the AFP police are keeping him there until Tuesday. The Chinese regime has one of the worst track records of human rights abuses in the world. Authorities rebuff international condemnations by claiming the issue is an internal matter. While events to mark Human Rights Day have been thwarted inside China, rights groups, particularly Tibetans and adherents of the Falun Gong spiritual practice, have held worldwide events to draw attention to human rights atrocities they say Chinese authorities are responsible for.
And coming up after the break, Canada's Nixon to go to China. November's export data misses expectations. And he's no Einstein, but find out what this little pooch can do. Phone tapping and leaked sex tapes have led to scandals that have rocked the Chinese regime, and it seems no one is immune. A recent report about the extent of wiretapping amongst Chinese officials has painted a picture of a political system where having dirt on someone else becomes political capital.
The Southern People Weekly magazine reported this week about a man who helps Chinese officials become bug-free. No, not bed bugs. the kind of bugs that can listen in on conversations and secretly videotape their lives. The article has generated considerable interest on the Chinese internet, following recent exposés of officials caught in compromising positions with young girls. According to the Southern magazine, the man, known as Chi Hong, has removed more than 300 bugs from cars, offices, and bedrooms of more than 100 Chinese officials in 2011. In his busiest week, more than 40 were uncovered. It's hard to say who put the spy devices there, but the usual suspects include spouses, lovers, and fellow communist comrades. To protect their private conversations, Chi Hong told reporters that officials would give each other pat-downs, disguised as an embrace, to check for bugging devices.
Chinese officials collect private information about each other, not necessarily to bring them down, but rather to coerce cooperation. If each official is able to hold one another ransom, it will be in their interest to form a group that protects one another.
And when that group breaks down, dirty secrets are exposed. Since the start of December, 5 Chinese officials have been placed under investigation after indecent tapes of them were leaked online. It comes amidst calls by Chinese leaders that communist officials must clean up their image, fix corruption, or else risk the collapse of the party. In April, following the ousting of Chongqing Party chief Bo Xilai, the New York Times reported that Bo had wiretapped phone calls of Chinese Premier Hu Jintao. Bo and his former police chief Wang reportedly set up a network of surveillance in the city in the name of their crime-fighting efforts, but now many suspect with ulterior motives.
A new day is dawning for Canadian independent oil company Nexen. Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced last Friday that China's state-owned oil company CNOOC would be allowed to buy Nexen. The $15 billion deal gives the Chinese company control over one of Canada's largest oil sands project. CNOOC also acquires Nexen's 43% stake in the Buzzard oil field, the largest in the United Kingdom's oil-rich North Sea. It follows months of debate about how much control foreign companies should have over Canada's energy sector.
The government's concern and discomfort for some time has been that very quickly a series of large-scale controlling transactions by foreign state-owned companies could rapidly transform this industry from one that is essentially a free market industry to one that is effectively under the control of a foreign government. And that is obviously not something that we think would be desirable.
Nexen shareholders approved the CNOOC takeover in September, but the deal was delayed by the Canadian government while it drafted updates to guidelines concerning investments by state-owned foreign companies. And tune in to tomorrow's NTD China Focus for more on what the Nexen deal means. And now to the latest economic data from China. Inflation has gone up slightly in November, with the Consumer Price Index rising 2% from a year ago, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Sunday's announcement marks the first time the index has risen since August. A jump of 3% came in for food prices, with vegetables 11% more expensive than a year ago. Chinese regulators have been trying to keep inflation down while trying to boost the economy at the same time. Industrial output did pick up, increasing by more than 10% in November from last year. But that did not translate to a big enough jump in exports, a major component that regulators have tried to push. Exports did rise in November, but only at 2.9%, much lower than the expected 9%. In our next story, meet Potato the dog. While most of his kinds are known for being a great companion, this little pooch has some calculating tricks under his fluffy coat.
A 2-year-old pet Samoyed living in Jiangsu province has shown a remarkable talent for math. Tudo, or Potato, can add, subtract, multiply, and divide with ease. This is how Luzi Sheng tests Tudo on his math skills.
How many digits does 10 million have? How many zeros after 1 in 10 million? Oh, 7 zeros. How much is 3.44 plus 3.56?
Even the written word poses no problems for Potato, who recognized the first figures with ease. When told the cameraman's cell phone number, Potato apparently memorized it and was able to recall a specific digit when asked to by Lu.
What's the third digit of the cameraman's mobile phone number?
So, what's next for potato? Well, maybe university if they start accepting dogs.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more on China-related topics, visit our website at ntd.tv. Coming up next, we have NTD China Focus, where I speak with Shelley Zhang and Jason Ma about the Chinese chatter on the end of the world. Stay tuned.